he said, you know, David would be up in the booth a lot of times and he would look out and he'd say, David, yo, watch this. Watch this one. And he'd play a record and make that one go crazy. And then this one would walk in and he said, watch me make this one dance. And he'd play a record and make that one. He used to play records based on the people he saw. And I thought, oh my God, he really did play this just for me.
Today is Thursday, March 2nd, 2023. Who are we speaking with?
My name is Ernest Kipling Britton. I'm also called Kip. I have records out as Kipper, now that I think about it. And I guess I've been around a while.
What is Soulful House?
What is soul? Is that really your first question? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think a marketing term. It's a marketing term. And it's one that, in my personal opinion, based on my years of experience, it is one that does house a disservice.
Unpack that.
Soulful house is not house. Soulful house is samba you can dance to. Soulful house is a combination of jazz and salsa, but not Nuyorican soul, although Nuyorican soul is very closely related and maybe even a part of what is marketed as soulful house. It's also Yoruba chants and sacred music and Himalayan drones and Hindu meditation sounds all over congas. Not just congas, but the exact same congas. Because if you listen to them, they're the exact same congas. And thank you, Louis Vega. But that's not house. It is something that what was house became for a subset of the population that danced to house that became a mainstream thing, but that's not house. It's good stuff if you like it, but it's not house.
What is house?
What is house? That's a good question. There's a popular house classic that says house is a feeling. And that's very, very true. Mathematically, one often hears house defined as 4 on the floor, syncopated, with clearly defined upper, middle, and lower drum tracks, sparse vocals, sparse music. And that was a very good definition for how house began. It's a good foundation for understanding what undergirds that which is house. It leaves out the possibility and the reality that house can be exceedingly symphonic and produced and giant and complex and melodic and all those things and still be house. So what's the feeling? What's the feeling? So house, for me, has to have a certain feeling. And it's hard to describe that feeling without using a word that out of context will sound like everything except what I mean it to sound. House should have grit. House should have a rawness, even in its production. House should have a sweatiness. It should have heat. But house should also have a kind of oomph that a lot of that which passes for house does not have. And it's because it's not gay enough. House began gay, not RuPaul lip sync for your life. What is that damn show called anyway? I love Ru. I mean, I've known Ru since The Factory, but the show is whatever. What is the show called?
I don't even know. I know.
Drag Race. Drag Race. Every queen in town is gonna kill me because I got that wrong, but including Mother Juan. but you know, house needs to be cunty, to be right, to be really, really right. And that's the word that I mean when I say it's gonna sound like everything that I don't mean. I don't mean that house has to be queenie. I don't mean that house has to be, that's, although that I do mean, right? And if you get this, I don't have to explain the rest of it to you. But if you don't get this, there's no production on the planet. There isn't a CD platform, DJ DIY on the planet that can give you this. Not a one. This I got from my elders. This I got from the kids. This I got because I was brave enough to go to a gay, Black, and Latino club at a time when I literally had an all-white life. All white. I was afraid of the underground clubs because I didn't understand the kids. I didn't. I did not get it. And as fate would have it, because I speak Italian, I knew a guy who was the assistant general manager of the hotel where I worked my last year at Georgetown, who also spoke Italian, but who was also Black and from DC, and who connected with me immediately on a number of levels. He spoke pot, he spoke Italian, he was gay, he was brown, in fact, he was Black, he lived in DC, and he knew all these things that I didn't know about DC, specifically about gay DC, which at the time was so Black that even the white people were Black. And that was a thing, right? That was a thing. Like to go to the brass rail and see white people who were just just used to blow my mind. But never mind all that. That comes with the territory though, and it comes with this, right? Because even those kids, the white kids that went to the clubhouse were white and jean only and got this without question. That's why they went to the clubhouse. And that's why I didn't notice them until I'd been going there for the longest time. Like, oh my God, they're not Black. Like it took that long to feel through the reel and notice, oh, you're not all, this isn't one massive energy that I have just found. You're actual individuals. And you come together and you make this. How incredible, how complex is that? But I jump ahead of myself. Carl, when I graduated from Georgetown in 1986, I graduated in May. I lost my job at the clubhouse, at the hotel that next month or so. And I lost it, oddly enough, and I will admit this for the first time in public, I lost it the day I did it for the first time. Because that was a Sunday. The Saturday night before, I agreed to go to the clubhouse with my friend, who was the general manager. Now, mind you, I jump ahead of myself just a wee bit. The first time I went to the clubhouse, I did not do acid, and that's important. The first time I went to the clubhouse, I went very early. Carl knew that I was like, oh my God, what is this? Who are these people? How is this going to work? And he also knew that I did not know how underground clubs work. So when I got there and it was midnight and the club was empty, and the music was down and the lights were up and people were like milling around like, and people like 15 people were coming in, but there was no one there. I was utterly confused. Like, what does this mean? Where, what, why, what? He's like, child, just chill, chill, chill. And the whole while I'm like, I don't understand what's good. Chill, chill, right? So that very first night, I got all dressed up. I'd been to the white clubs in DuPont Circle, and I came back, and Carl came to my house at like 11:30, and he was wearing shorts and sensible shoes and socks, and he had a bag with a change of clothes in it, and baby powder, and a goodie bag, because he had his goodies. I didn't know these were things I came to learn, and all the necessaries for an underground club in his bag. I'm like, what is this bag? Oh, you'll see, you'll learn. If you ever come back, let's just go this first time. So we go this first time, and I'm like dressed. And he's like, you're gonna wish you had worn all that. I'm like, no, because people are gonna see you. He's like, no one's gonna see you. I'm like, what do you mean no one's gonna see you? He's like, wait. Lights are up, music slow, we're kind of dancing. And mind you, this is key. This is the first time since going to the garage several years before that I'd heard a Richard Long sound system. I'd been to the garage, but I did not understand where I had been or what I had been to until I went back to the garage with Carl. But I'd been already. I'd heard sound. I knew what sound was, but I'd never heard it in DC, and I'd never heard it that close. I'd never been within arm's reach of that kind of power. And right about 12:20, Mandrill pumped up the sound a little bit and the lights came down, and I went, and he went, just wait. And all the way through the 15 minutes or so of him bringing the sound all the way up, I nearly died because the sound invaded me in a way that I had never felt. Footnote, I had felt it the first time I went out in New York, but that had been so long and I was so mainstream bound that I didn't connect. And I also wasn't in a room full of Black people. And that's really, really, really important. I'd never been in a club full of only people of color. That experience changed everything. And by the end of the night, I thought, okay, this is really scary, but oh my God, what does this mean? And yeah, I'd like to come back. And he's like, well, if you want to come back, we'll do it again. We go back, and maybe the second or third time, he says, well, you know what you see me putting in my mouth? And I'm like, oh my God, really? You do? And then I started to think I could never hang out with this man again. He's like, everybody in this club is on. You just didn't know it. I was like, oh, really? And so then I was introduced to a whole new thing, and that took some months, right? About 3 months before they let that happen. But the first time they let it happen was the last time I worked at the hotel. I had, for whatever reason, I'd lost the job, and my very last day was Sunday. I went to the clubhouse Saturday night, and that was the first time I did. I then left the club so I could go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, tripping balls for the very first time. And I just was like, wait, what if I help? So I called my friends, like, I did it, I don't know what to do. They're like, well, nothing. Don't do anything. Just enjoy it. You'll be fine. You'll come down. It'll be fine. And surely enough, it was. From that point on, I experienced the clubhouse the way the members experienced it. Because at that point, the members, and unbeknownst to me, all the members knew about me because the members brought people in. It was a private club. You didn't get in off the street. If someone showed up, everyone knew that someone had brought someone and they knew who that someone was. Carl was like a really special member. Everyone loved Carl. So Carl brought me. The the whole membership had been looking out for me the entire time. Nothing crossed my path without a member's approval. And I did no drugs that Carl or another member didn't give me. And if they did a whole one, I got a quarter. And that quarter for a year. I couldn't talk to anybody they didn't approve of. Someone checked on me on the hour, wherever I was in the club. Carl knew every move I made the entire while I was at the clubhouse, because that's really what they did. They took care of the kids. They did. They knew what this environment was that they had built and that they kept special, and they literally took care of us. And I was in the last class that got that treatment, because the following year they started dying.
Mm.
And within 3 years, there was no clubhouse, much as there was no garage. In fact, the garage closed in '89. The clubhouse closed in '90 or '91.
Mm.
Half the membership died within, I guess, 2 years. Much like the garage, because they were sister clubs, right? But let me back up. Because they were sister clubs, the catacombs, the garage, and the clubhouse shared membership, and you could get into Paradox as well, even though it wasn't a sister. But they all had Richard Long's sound systems. They were all well known, and the people that I knew at the clubhouse then took me back to the garage, and that was my reintroduction, not just to the garage, but to New York. I then moved to Europe, worked in the clubs in Europe, produced music, because I had the schooling that I had gotten in New York and in DC. When I left Europe, I came back to New York. It was '91. It was '92. The factory was still good and was going to be good for about 5 more minutes. And '92 to '94, we lived on 27th Street. It was fabulous. And then things got very white and very special KE and God knows what became of the world thereafter, but it was no longer us. It was no longer right. It was no longer house, to bring this full circle, but it's marketed as house. That's what they say they like. But what those silly kids that come over on the tunnels and bridges from New Jersey to go to what they call the Sound Factory think is house, not only has nothing to do with the Sound Factory, but it has nothing to do with house, because it doesn't have that. And as long as the factory had that, it was the factory. And the factory was all that, from start to finish. The garage was all that from start to finish. Sound Factory Bar was all that. When it was all that, it was all that. Who else could really give you that like that? Shelter 101 could give you that. From Shelter 201 forward, it's the luck of the draw. But Shelter 101 gave you that. When I was a young boy, when Area still shared the shelter space, when Sounds of Blackness performed on Gay Pride, which would have been like '90, Shelter gave you that. Those were the days when we would go to the shelter instead of the factory, because Junior was already too white and too weird, and there were too many white kids over there. So it was about it was about shelter. And for a while, a lot of us kids that went to the factory would go to shelter because it was as close as we could get. It was just too white over on 27th Street. And as we used to say back then, Junior was banging pots and pans. He wasn't giving you love break and work this pussy. He was banging pots and pans. And those weird white kids were flipping out all over the place and like hanging out on the floor. Like, what was that about? That whole change, it all happened together. And that's what happened to house, to bring this full circle. Sadly, at the exact same time, 1995, a guy named John Davis shows up. And he wants to bring the underground to everyone. And he starts a party called Midas, which didn't really take off, but it took off well enough for him to get, I guess, notice from Claussell and Joe and Danny. And so they decide to do Body and Soul. At the time, I was still a journalist. So I was fortunate enough to be the first journalist to cover Body and Soul, internationally and nationally. And then I said, this is going to be big. But my biggest fear was that it would be mainstream. And that's exactly what happened, because that's exactly what John Davis wanted to do. He did it. But in the process, house became what the straight kids at Body and Soul liked the most. And that was that very sweet, very salsa-y, very Eastern driven, what I used to refer to as non-committal music. That you can pretend to be anything while you're dancing to it and it's okay, right? You can't really pretend to work this pussy. You either get it and you work it, or you sit your ass down because you don't know what you're doing. But say would be Santero here. Like I have my African roots. I have my things, and I get that. And Body and Soul, oddly enough, was a part of that. There was a very real spirituality about Body and Soul. The same was true of the factory. The same was true of Sound Factory Bar. The same was true of the garage. The same is true of the true house experience. This is not just a thing. It's not just social. It's also about the soul. We used to say, that we were going to church. We didn't say that for nothing. House really is a feeling. The same way that true disco was a feeling. Disco gave rise to house. The feelings are not unrelated. Not at all. And it was that feeling that started to give way to popularity, to marketability, to accessibility. Work This Pussy isn't accessible to you if you can't take off your shirt and sweat. But Do You Reconsole is accessible to you even if you don't take off your shirt and sweat. And it's okay even if you're not gay. And it's okay even if you're a girl. It's okay even if you're white. You can claim this. You can get into this.
Describe Body and Soul at its peak when the three of them are like killing it on the dance floor. Describe that feeling.
The best and most accessible mainstream reference I can give is a pep rally, because a revival isn't accessible to everyone. But if you know anything about Southern Protestant religion, the very best thing I can tell you, it's like going to a tent revival. So the kids say when a party is good, it turns. When Body and Soul was turning, like turning, there's one thing that happens when anytime a party turns, like truly turns, the air changes. It gets very, very thick, almost like visible static, as if there were particles suspended in the air, moving very, very slowly. There is a point at which everything moves very, very slowly, despite the speed of the music, despite the collective rhythmic, repetitive motions around one. Everything moves very, very slowly when a party's really turning, because what happens is that everything moves beyond the plane in which the music is happening, and everything happens kind of up here, right? No one, the dance will be packed, but no one bumps into each other. All the energies meet and meld and bounce and ricochet and tumble, but they do not collide. And when they do, what you have are two smiling people going, oh, because you can always tell when there's friction on the dance floor. Everyone on the dance floor can feel when there's friction anywhere on the dance floor, because there is no friction in this when the floor's turning, when the air's thick, you can feel the motion of every dancer on the floor, and they can feel you. And you know who else can feel it? Joe, Danny, and Francois. Even Francois can feel it. But oh my God, can Danny and Joe feel it? Danny, Joe too, but Joe can get lost in his own feelings. Danny can stay right there. This is where the dancers are. This is where Danny is. The dancers go here. Danny's going here. Dancers go there. Danny goes there. Danny wants dancers to go here. He will bring you. He won't force you. He won't push you. He doesn't have to, because he knows where you are. And Body and Soul was like that. You could think what the next record should be, and if you were right, that would be the next record. If you were following the DJ's story, if you were paying attention to the narrative being given, you know where it was going, and you'd be right. If you saw a certain person walk in and you know the relationship that that person has with that DJ, you know where the music's going. For example, great example. If you were at Body and Soul and you were dancing and you looked up, and by you, I mean, you're one of the people who either hang out in the VIP or who dance in the area of Body and Soul that is to the front and left of the DJ booth, because basically all of the VIPs hung out in this area. And VIPs, all the club royalty, all the old kids, all the old schoolers, and any special guests, because all the special guests were either guests of the DJ booth, guests of the promoter, or guests of one of those people. So this side of the club was kind of the driving side, and that side of the club was kind of the tourist side. In fact, we used to very much refer to it as the tourist section, because at a certain point, it really was full of tourists. when things would go really well and you're dancing, and say, let me pick somebody that you would know, Princess. You're dancing, and all of a sudden you see Princess coming in, right? And Danny is playing. And Princess walks in, and you know Princess. For the benefit of those of you who may not know Bernard Thomas, what is his name? Bernard Thomas, no?
Yes.
His mother named him Bernard Thomas, but the whole world calls him Princess. Her, Princess. Princess is a phenomenon. And to see Princess walk into the club, you know she's here. And if you saw Danny and you saw Danny saw Princess, you could pretty much guess where things were gonna go. They were gonna go very much down the, let's see, the Elements of Vogue direction, the ha dance, I Got My Education, very, and that was a good thing. It's like, oh, good, Princess is here. Danny's gonna clean out, yay! And now we're gonna get this, and now it's going to pump, because now Danny's got kids to dance for him, and that's all he needs. All he needs is something to play. But he's not playing the records; he's playing us. A real DJ plays the dancers. Larry played the dancers. Danny played the dancers. David Mancuso played the dancers when he wasn't caught up in his own head, but he was normally caught up in his own head because of the dancers. So even then, he played the dancers. But when David was David, he played the dancers. The record is for you. Sometimes specifically for that one or that one. In this case, it would be like, I Got My Education for Princess because she just showed up. There's a disco classic called I Want You For Myself. The original version. I forgot now who does it, but it's very disco symphonic. Violins, and it's not too hard, but it's very quick. I loved that record, and for years, Danny let me know that he saw me by playing that record. That was his little love note to me, like, hey. And I know, like, he's playing for me, you know? A real DJ plays his dancers and plays all of them, but especially his. That's how you tweak the party. When Body and Soul was at its peak, Joe and Danny, even more than Francois, although Francois could do it, would play us one by one. Just, okay, now, get all those little pieces where you want them, and then pow, 5 great records in a row, and the club would go berserk because all the little pieces are in place. All that energy is going right where the DJ wants it to go. And everybody else is gonna get caught up in it. There's no way you can't. The air is thick, the club's turning. And that is what Body and Soul was really like. I remember once a friend had come from overseas, and I didn't know that he was in the club. And I didn't know that his girlfriend was in the club. His girlfriend was actually a guy. We'll leave that alone for now. I didn't know if he knew that either at the time. But the club was packed. It's Sunday. It's like 7 o'clock. And I get this feeling that someone I know is on the opposite side of the dance floor. I'm by the door to the booth. I know you know the club, right? So I'm by the door to the booth off the floor. This opposite side is the opposite side by the bathrooms. The direct opposite side, over a good 1,000 people. It's Sunday, it's hot, it's sweaty. Joe's playing, it's loud. And I get someone you know is on the other side of the door, other side of the club. I decided to follow my instinct and I made a beeline. And people just kind of parted. I made a beeline across the dance floor. And there was a friend of mine from Holland whom I had not seen in maybe 10 years at that point. But I felt his presence because the dance floor is one energetic being when it's right, when all the pieces are in place. And you can feel everything. You can feel everyone. You know when somebody's crying. You know when someone's upset. You know when someone's not feeling well. You know when someone's caught up in joy. You know when someone is just feeling it. You know when someone's in love. Just by how they dance and the energy that enters you from that collective. If house is anything, it's that. It's what takes you to that, right? Maybe other things take you other places, but house, when done right, with kids in the house, you got to have kids in the house. This is not going to happen with a bunch of handbags on the floor and drinks in hand. It doesn't work that way. The heels have to go. Give me some sweat, some baby powder, and let the air thicken. Leave the mix alone. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. That's the thing that kids now don't understand. A mix that lasted 15 minutes. 3 turntables for 20 minutes. Groove. I remember going to Shelter 101 saying, I would go to Shelter 101 when I felt I needed to take a sound bath. And I would literally say that. You could say that sort of thing back then. I need to take a sound bath. I'm going to Shelter. Oh yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you, go ahead. A sound bath, just naked in sound. Maybe I'd have shorts on, but the shirt would go because Shelter was hot. But it was the sound, just to let sound wash over you and massage you and cleanse you and de-stress you. There's nothing like stretching out into music. Music that can actually hold your body. House can do that with a groove. When you know it's not going anywhere. And that was the beauty of the fact you knew that groove wasn't going anywhere. You gotta go to the bathroom, fine. Come back, you'll be right here. You can pick up where you left off. Because it's not every 3 minutes a new record. It's not every 5 minutes a new style. No, this is a house club. We will be doing this until noon and maybe past, if you're lucky. You can count on this. You can be assured of where you are. You can let yourself go knowing that where you're going is here. And you know me, your DJ, and I'm gonna be with you for 12 hours. Not 2 hours for $10,000 and all of a sudden you're tired because your Mac blew out. No, 12 hours of manual labor with records and tapes. That symbiosis cannot be recreated because it's analog, it's real. You're dancing, I'm playing, and because you're playing, I'm dancing, and because you're dancing, I'm playing. And we're doing this together. Even though I'm not down there and you're not up here, you're up here and I'm down there. You don't have that anymore. there's the disconnect between people who go to hear or see a DJ and therefore are not dancing, and people who think they are going to dance, but who unfortunately haven't ever experienced that because they've never had analog music. They've only ever had this digital thing. So they've never really felt it, right? Then you've got the DJ who's caught up in the performance as opposed to the participation. So as opposed to a dance club experience of cohesive spiritual transcendence, what you have are three separate simulacra, simultaneous simulacra. The performance of the DJ, the observation of the tourist, and the imitation of the participant. What you do not have is the symbiosis of dancer and dancing, of dancer and DJ, because none of those things are real. Make sense?
Fucking fantastic.
Yep.
House versus techno. Is it a useful distinction since they were both created and pioneered by DJs, producers of color?
Yes. Yes, it is a useful distinction because in the same way, so for my purposes, techno lets, this is really simplistic and really sort of reductionist. Techno lets cool straight DJs give you that. Right? Cool straight producers give you that. I'm often amazed at how much oomph a lot of techno has when the guys that are behind, and it's usually guys that are behind techno, are usually not very at all. they're very like, well, you know, they're particularly Midwestern, and that's not a bad thing, but they don't present the way a New Yorker, for example, might present, who, straight though he may yet comfortably have an edge. That's some, you know, as they say in the South, a bit of sugar in his tank. But I'm often pleasantly surprised at how what appear to be just very mainstreamy, very L78 guys produce these really groovy tracks with some ow, you know, some ow in it. And I'm like, where did they get that? Like, who taught them that? But good for them, because that's house. That takes what would be an otherwise interesting, complex production, all digital, and gives it a little something that actually makes it house. Because now my butt will shake. It's the difference between, and I can show you better than tell you, it's the difference between having your feet do this, right? Great track, not house. House, the butt moves because it can't help it. And if your cue track makes me go every so often, you got house. If at no point my hips slip, it's a cute track. But it don't got this. Why is it a useful distinction? Because I think it provides a whole new venue of expression for people who don't have that Work This Pussy Foundation, to which I am so faithful and for which I am ever so grateful, but which a lot of people just don't have, and they weren't that blessed. They didn't get to go to our clubs. There were no houses to teach them, you know, like they just did not. But they get it. I think that's a lot of what Detroit and Chicago are. They're what happens when you get it, but you don't really have the foundation for it. You don't have the context for it. You don't have the kids, or at least not the same kids. But you do have the oomph. So your approach is as umphful as it can be given your environment, but your environment is rather cold and rather industrial and rather raw. Hence, that sound for the longest time tended to be rather industrial and rather raw. As opposed to the New York sound, which got smoother and smoother and smoother and smoother as time progressed. I think it's a useful distinction in that way. I think it's not useful when techno, like all the other brands of house, become ways to market things that are not house, not music, not worth dancing to. And I think that happens with your offshoots. A lot of soulful house should be rebranded as samba. A lot of soulful house does not need to be made. Though it wasn't a good poem, there was no need to put it over a conga track. She's a pretty girl. She sounds like all the other pretty girls. Find me a girl that sounds more than pretty. Give me a poem that's something more than not rhyming. And find me a guy to play the congas as opposed to a track that you took them from. I'll come back and listen. But right now, I know where that conga track came from, and I can predict where the vocals are going. And they're not going to rhyme. So what's a formula but a formula? And mainstream or soulful house, a formula is a formula. And my problem with soulful house right now is it is the formula. Body and Soul is responsible for that formula. Body and Soul made that formula happen. Joe Claussell made that formula happen. Louis Vega made that formula happen. I will never forgive them for ruining house for the rest of us in that way. But the rest of you will forever love them because they've given you something to dance to. And I'm really glad about that. It's just not house. And that's what I mean when I say, you might not like what I have to say about something. I mean, it's great music, but for real.
Discuss the value of a DJ residency. For example, Junior at Sound Factory.
It is invaluable. Invaluable. Goes right back to what I was saying. People today have no notion of continuity. They do not know what it means to be told a story on the dance floor. To be taken through somebody's personal drama. My man left me. I'm going to make all of you suffer because I didn't get none last night. That happened at the garage. That happened at the factory. I distinctly remember, oh, Junior pissed because she ain't getting none. Listen how she playing. Somebody need to go. But yes, you can feel it. What is wrong with her? You'd be able to, what is going on? Oh, she's upset. Past a certain point, there were times that you'd go to the factory and you'd know somebody died that Junior knew. And then there'd come a break, you know. I remember the night that Relight My Fire, Dan Hartman, the night Dan Hartman died. I knew something was off. Like you could just feel it, right? The way he was playing, the break between mixes felt melancholy. They were a little too long. You just knew something was off. And then came the I'd like to take a moment of silence for a dear old friend, blah, 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 blah. Dan Hartman passed tonight, and I thought, wow. I thought we had it bad. And And my friends all had it much, 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 much worse than I did, right? They were all next to the casket. I was always one step away, for the most part, from things that were truly tragic. I dated Carl. Carl was Angie's son. So Angie's death hit Carl head on. It didn't hit me head on, but I dealt with it as a function of dating a Ganza. For the short time that I did, which was all it took. But same with Danny, right? When Danny died, I was close with Danny, but not as close as Carl and the members of the house. So while it hit them head on, I was still one step away, right? I remember thinking then, Junior was not only not one step away, but really everyone he knows is dying. Like even in the music industry, the people that he looks up to or looked up to when he was becoming who he is now are now dying around him. The people that brought him here on to 27th Street, the old Ganzas at this point were all dead or dying. Danny and David Ian were still alive, but all the rest of them had passed. Not Coco. Coco's still alive today, but you know, there was, but that point at which so many of them had passed so quickly, right? And then David Hartman died. That must have been in 93, 94, I want to say. I just remember feeling incredibly sorry for him, knowing that it wasn't just this, and being able to feel that in the music, being able to feel that in the mix, being able to like to sense it. Kids today have no idea what that's like because there are no residents. When you have a resident, I knew where I was going every Saturday night. I knew where I was going every Wednesday night. I knew where I was going every Friday night. I knew where I was going. If I went out, I knew where I was going. I knew who to expect. I knew what style to expect. I knew who the kids were going to be. And I knew what I was getting into. I knew what I was signing up for, right? As opposed to going out and wondering what it was going to be like. I went out because I knew what it was going to be like. I went to the factory because I knew what Junior was going to play. And if he didn't, I was going to pitch a bitch. Because goddamn it, we didn't pay for you to get up there and bitch and moan. Play some fucking music. And we would stand on the dance floor and stomp our feet. Play some fucking music. Play some fucking music. You could do that. I remember people sitting out on the dance floor because they're pissed because you're not playing. You can't do that now because there's no resident. But you're gonna ask for your money back? I guess you could, but that's kind of not the point. I didn't go out to ask for my money back. You know, I went out to go somewhere, and a resident can do that. A resident can create community, can foster community, can build a dance floor. So that when people come to the club, they're not coming, it's not like going to a mall where you find what you find, right? The store is open, you just don't know who's gonna be in it. No, it's like going to a church. Not only do you know the preacher, but you know who's sitting in the pews and you know who the ushers are. You know what to expect. Now, is that what you want? Then go there. If that's not what you want, maybe you want to go somewhere else. Or maybe you're coming for the guest. So go sit down because the guest doesn't play until 2 o'clock. But until 2 o'clock, you got the resident. You know what's happening. Places like Body and Soul would not have been possible were it not for the triumvirate residency. The factory would not have been possible. Sound Factory Bar would not have been possible. None of its nights. Frankie's night, Louie's night, nor Danny's night. None of those nights. And the club had nights because those boys had weekly residencies on those nights. So on Wednesday night, it was New Yorican Soul. On Friday night, it was Frankie. On Saturday night, it was Danny, and you knew the deal. Sunday night classics, you knew what was coming. God, I miss Sunday classics. Oh, I miss Sunday. And the mini balls, right? Like all you knew. Residences make that possible. I miss the days when you could plan around knowing your clubs and knowing your DJs. I do miss that.
House and Afrofuturism, reality, playground, or wishful thinking?
Playground, reality. Wishful thinking, I don't know enough yet. I've only heard a little, and I'm presuming that by Afrofuturism, you're referring to the new trend in house that's coming out of South Africa and Southern Africa in general. I think I'm hoping that it will be more house than pretty soulful samba. I hear a lot of the pretty soulful samba in it, and I'm sure that's how it got there. But I'm hoping that Africa will save it and put some more oomph in it, because that's really where that oomph comes from, you know. And so playground, because I think that poverty is a wonderful mother to creativity. I think prosperity is a wonderful cradle for expansion. And so I think poverty is abject like difficulty is producing some really interesting music in Southern Africa right now. And as they grow, as things get better, that will expand, it will get out, it will grow. I hope it grows with more oomph and less la 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 la. I really, really do. I hope it's gayer somehow. I just don't know what that means in the South African context, but I hope it's gayer somehow. I think I wish more than anything else that gay subculture were somehow able to reclaim itself, because if it could, I think house could reclaim itself, and disco could reclaim itself, and R&B could reclaim itself, and maybe hip hop could go find a real home. Maybe. But those other genres that involve talent and training and vocals and instruments could actually reclaim themselves.
Let's go back to the garage.
Okay.
Paint us a picture of the Paradise Garage. What does it smell like? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What are people wearing? What are people doing? Describe the walk up the ramp. Tell us about the first time, how you discovered the club, and what was your reaction being there the first time as a newbie, and then after being an experienced clubber from DC and going back. And
okay,
so give us that. Paint us a picture.
I was at a fashion show at Georgetown in October of 1982, and the girl that coordinated the show was a very popular girl named Lori Williams, who was so there was a group of people at Georgetown known as the Eurofags. These were people who were very Europhilic in general. I was an aspiring Eurofag. She was queen of the Eurofags, the Black queen of the Eurofags, and she coordinated the fashion show. She went on to be Jean-Paul Gaultier's like personal assistant for a little while. But in the meantime, she was going to New York with our very wealthy co-students and her very wealthy friends, and they would go out to New York. And then after studio and this and that. They would go to the garage. And she went to the garage and she came back and she went on and on about Larry. Oh, Larry's brilliant. You have to go to the garage. Oh, Kipper, when you go to New York, you have to go to the garage. Larry's brilliant. And she kept just saying, Larry's brilliant. And she coordinated, she choreographed the final scene of the show to All Cats Are Gray by The Cure, because Larry had played it. And I thought, he played this on a dance floor? I mean, The Police is my idea of ecstasy at this point. Nina Hagen is my idea of ecstasy at this point, and that's really significant. My favorite thing on the whole wide world, Cosma Shiva by Nina Hagen. I know nothing. I know disco, but I know white disco. This is October. This is September. End of October, I get a student loan. So we used to run a scam on the bookstore. We would go and buy really expensive books, take them back, get the money, take the money, buy a ticket to New York on People Express, which is like $24 round trip at the time, have enough money for drinks and like go to New York for the weekend on the bookstore. Georgetown being a wealthy place, who really gave a fuck where the money came or went? And that was really our attitude at the time. It's like, there's so much money, who gives a shit where it came from or how you got it. I did this, I ran this little scam so I could go to New York for the weekend so I could go to the garage. With my friend, Lori, who chickens out at the last minute. So I take the train in from Jersey to the World Trade Center, which was still up at the time. And I got out to change to the sea, looked up, and I went, these buildings are not gonna last forever. And this was like in 82. I looked at these buildings are not gonna last forever. Went and caught the train. I knew how to get to the garage because I saw some Black gay guys in front of me going into the train. And I said to myself, where they go, the garage is. They got out at Spring Street, I got out at Spring Street. They walked to King Street, I walked to King Street. They walked to number 87, I went to the door number 87. And Noel said, who are you? And the queen that was in front of me that I had followed turned around and said, oh no, it's okay, he's with me. But I didn't hear that. Noel pulls me aside and he's like, this is a gay club. Do you know this is a gay club? And he's like, is this a gay club? Like, yes. And I guess it was Noel, I guess. Because this is my first time going. Subsequently, I learned that that's who's at the door, right? He grills me like 3 questions. And I didn't think he was gonna let me in. And he goes, all right, you can go in, have a good time. And then I go. There's this ramp with lights down the middle of it. And I'm like, up, yeah, go on. Walking up the ramp. And I'm like, this is weird. And as I get up the ramp, actually from the street, what you could hear was, and you're going up the ramp and it's like, the building is insisting on you. But until the doors open, that's all you hear. And at the top of the ramp, you get up the ramp, top of the ramp, you turn, and there are these double doors. Like 2, I think there were 8. 2, 4, 6, 8, right? I think. Or maybe there were 1, 2, 3, 4, but there were 2 sets of double doors. Pushes the door open and as long as the door was closed, all you got was boom, boom, boom. I go through the door and there's a room to the left with glass brick in a curve. I subsequently learned that this means that I have come after a renovation because this room is new. It's the new drug room. And there's neon in the glass brick. and the wall like undulates. And it's off to my left. I don't go there. I go straight ahead. And straight ahead, there's an opening, and then there's this big room. And that's the dance floor. And there's music everywhere. Everywhere. But it's not oppressive. It's big, but it's not oppressive. And I kind of look around. I've never been in a space like this before. There are the bleachers, there's the stage, and then there's this roof. And there's some people, but not like tons and tons of people. There's some people are coming in. The club is filling up. I go across, and there's a room behind this, and there's like a bar, and there are flowers, and there's a punch bowl, and there's a room off to this way, and I go into it, and it's a theater. And there's theater seating, and there's a movie playing, and I'm like, that's cool. And so then I go back, and I think I drink some of the punch. I go back onto the floor, and I start dancing, and I look to my left, and I look to my right, and behind me, I see that people are coming, and they're some people are dancing, but they're kind of gathering, and I can't quite make out why. And then I noticed that most of them are doing, and then there are more people, and there are more people, and there are more people, so they're kind of gathering behind me. And I realize I'm the only person not doing like on either side of me. And I think that's too bad. And the music stops. And I realize why all the people are gathering behind me is because the stage is here and the show is about to start. Janice McClellan, McCleary, something, turned it out, opening for Madonna. No, Madonna to open for this. And it was Madonna's second performance. Not popular. She opens for Janice, who turns it out for Nona Hendrix, who turns it out. And I've never been in a concert in the middle of a dance party in a dance club quite like this. Certainly not with the sound, and not the way, turned it out, right? Out! Show ends. Again, people sort of move back. And I'm like, wow, that was really something. And the next thing that happens blows me away. Larry plays Cosma Shiva by Nina Hagen. And I have the distinct impression that the DJ is playing just for me. Years later, I recounted this story to someone, and they're like, everybody says that the first time they went to the club, it felt like Larry was playing just for them. Larry played his dancers. I years later met David Losada, who was very close to Larry. And he said to me, David would be up in the booth a lot of times, and he would look out and he'd say, David, yo, watch this. Watch this one. And he'd play a record and make that one go crazy. And then this one will walk in and he said, watch me make this one dance. And he'd play a record and make that one. He used to play records based on the people he saw. And I thought, oh my God, he really did play this just for me. Maybe he did. Maybe he looked at me and thought, that little new wave punky kid, he's gonna love this. Maybe he really was the magician voodoo priest that a lot of us really think he was. And he felt it. But I never forgot that night. I never forgot the garage. And when I went back, I remembered. Yeah, I've been here. Larry played Cosma Shiva by Nina Hagen. Yes. Yes. So when I went back, it was 86. Palazzo pants. Full. But now I know, right? Now I've dropped some music. Now I'm not afraid of the punch. Now I go up on the roof. Now I discover the roof. Now I talk to people. Now I notice that people are, that they are friendlier than I think they are. The first times I went to the garage, I didn't think people were friendly, but it's because I didn't understand. It's not that kind of club. Like, people aren't gonna walk up to you and be like, "Hi, how are you?" That's not why they're there. But that's not the point. When I went back, I met people on the dance floor, which is to say, I met their energies. I danced with people. And those are the people that I remembered from after the garage closed. I remembered the people that I danced with in 1986 and 1987, those last couple years when I went back to the garage after the clubhouse. And was cognizant of the energies around me. By that time, Larry was playing house. So I also got to experience Larry playing disco and Larry playing house and compare it to Mandrill and Tito playing the same records on the same kind of system in DC. And like everyone, my opinion was that Larry couldn't mix, but Larry could program. And that the garage was so incredible that anybody that played there would seem incredible. Larry playing there was paradise, because Larry could program the fuck out of a night, but not necessarily mix the fuck out of it. Whereas the boys in DC could mix, they could mix the sun and the moon all night long and never miss a beat. They were incredible. And they had the same repertoire. So they played the same soaring disco. They played the same bang, they bust you down house, but they were smoother about it. The garage under Larry could sometimes be too loud. The clubhouse was never too loud, but the clubhouse was a smaller venue with much shorter walls. So the sound experience was different. They didn't have to try as hard to do as much. Larry had damn near 2 floors of ceiling to fill with sound and all the power in the world to do it. But it was a more difficult space to manage in terms of managing sound, in my opinion. Not because I was in the booth, but because I experienced the 2 rooms. There was a rattle at a certain point in the garage. Danny Krivit used to talk about it too. And I noticed that if the garage was too loud, it wasn't that the walls, boom, they rattled. They literally rattled. The Sound Factory had the advantage of not rattling. The walls would boom, but they never rattled. The roof didn't rattle, right? It didn't sound like the building was coming apart. If the garage was full force, it sounded like the garage was coming apart. Like it was gonna come apart on you. Because that was a lot of sound. I think my most fond memory of the garage is, I think it happened in 1986, and it was house, and it was like Robert Owens type shit, or Marshall Owens type, Marshall Jefferson, that vein right there. Bled into Liz Torres. And Larry didn't fuck up the mix. And that 20 minutes of swirling palazzo pants and sweaty black bodies and just the look that's caught between orgasm and death. That is total ecstasy. Just that plays over and over. When I really think of like a pinnacle moment at the garage, that plays over and over in my mind. Spinning. Because palazzo pants would flow out as you spun. If you were doing the hustle, like the pants would just like flow out. And there was so much flowing, and spinning and flipping and whatnot, that sticks out in my mind. What else did you ask me to describe about the garage?
Basically, that's it. Like the experience, the vibe, the everything. That's a good.
I think the other thing that I must point out, I don't remember ever seeing more than maybe 3 white people at the garage. I know they were there. I don't remember seeing them. My initial experiences at the Sound Factory when I first started going, I know there were white people there. I don't remember them. What I remembered about those clubs was how very Black and Latino they were.
So that's my next question, actually.
Oh.
Explain to a 2-part question. Part 1, explain to people the distinction between an underground club and a regular club. And then 2, explain to people what it's like to party with a room full of Black and Latino people.
I don't think I can explain the second, but I'll try. The first, the difference between an underground club and a regular club, is the difference between things that are readily available. It's, oh, wow, that's really hard. It's harder than I thought it would be. It's like going to a regular club is like going to a mall. The thing that makes it possible for all the people that go to the mall to go to the mall is the fact that they have money to spend at the mall. They aren't all going to the mall for the same thing. They're not all going to the mall for the same reason. They're not all going to the mall at the same time or with the same people, not even necessarily to the same place in the mall. They're just all going to the mall. That's what it's like to go to a regular club. What it's like to go to an underground club, going to an underground club is like going to, Jimmy Choo's. So you want to buy shoes? Great. You could go to the mall and buy shoes, but you're not going to find these shoes at the mall. So you want to buy shoes? Great. But unless you're willing to spend the money, you're not going to get these shoes anywhere. So you want to buy shoes? Great. But if you really want shoes, you're going to have to come here, because the only place you can get those shoes is here. And the only people who want those shoes are the only people who are coming to this store. And the only reason they're coming to this store is to get those shoes. And the thing that unites them is not the fact that they can afford the shoes. It's not the fact that they want shoes. It's not even the fact that they are out shopping. It's that they are here for these shoes and will do whatever they have to do to have these shoes here. That is what it's like to go to an underground. Now add in the fact that the shoes are super, super expensive, but most of the people in the club did not pay for the shoes. Most of the people in this club were given the shoes because they should have the shoes, because the shoes fit. And because they have the shoes, everybody else wants the shoes. That is what it's like to go to an underground club.
That's perfect.
I'm glad I was able to come up with a good analogy. So what's it like to dance in a room full of Black and Latino gay men? It's like swimming in a heated pool. It's like being a car in a car wash. It's like being the cream filling in a profiterole. The way things fit, the seamlessness with which people of color interact rhythmically is really difficult to describe out of context, but impossible to notice in context. Impossible not to notice. Back in the day, I actually paid attention. I would go out in DC, I'd go out in New York, and watch the way the kids dance to the music. And I noticed something. I noticed that DC kids did this, and New York kids did this. And I tried to figure out like what that was about, you know? Why do DC kids do this and why do New York kids do that, right? And I never really got at a good reason for it, but I did notice that go-go happened in New York, in DC, and go-go is very right? But South Soul happens in New York. And South Soul is very right? And so the closest I could come to it, to an answer, was that it had something to do with the cultural roots of the African Americans that populated those cities. Mm. And that there were that it was likely that there were more Caribbean influences in New York than there were in DC, and that DC had likely more British influences than New York did, because I knew from reggae that British marching music, the marching music of the British Army in the colonies, had a lot of influence on the way music developed in English colonies. I also knew that coming from a French and Spanish colony, that the music of our African ancestors and of our European ancestors clearly shaped music here in Louisiana, like it did in Haiti, like it did in Cuba, like it did in Guadeloupe, like it did in the Dominican Republic, or even Southern Mexico for that matter. And I saw that those things were reflected in music in New York in ways that they weren't reflected in music in DC. So it occurred to me that perhaps that the way the body responded was actually tied to the way the body had been conditioned generations ago. That literally the experience of slavery under the British versus the experience of slavery under the French or Spanish, the experience of being in a Dutch colony, New York, versus being in an English colony, DC, that kind of thing. That the end result were these differences in music, you know, the way music developed in New Orleans versus the way it developed in New York versus the way it developed in DC. And I actually at that point started to see some parallels between New Orleans and New York that are very, very real, and that I live now as a person who sort of bounces between the two of them. There are a lot of similarities, and it is right, it is fitting that jazz have a home in New York. It makes sense. From the perspective of a New Orleanian, jazz makes as much sense in New York as it does in Chicago. It's about the Great Migration. And
Mm.
jazz follows the path of the migration, much like much as Africans followed the Silk Road all the way to ancient China. Or to ancient America, as it were.
Mm.
Real tobacco goes out if you don't smoke it. That's why I have to keep lighting it. It's not a joint, just FYI.
There's some that theorize that house is a triumvirate. House to music, house to dance, house to culture. What say you, fact or fiction?
Fact.
More, please.
Fact. I think you take house dance as a phenomenon, as a genre or a subgenre of dance study, and consider it separate from the music and the culture. I think in all fairness, that is a valid subgenre of dance study. I think it is, it's an incredibly inclusive thing, and it allows a lot of people access to movement that their cultures would not allow them. Were it not for the music and the culture, the dance would not exist. But I think the dance exists independently of the music and the culture. I think that the dance has its own culture. I think that there are a group of dancers, people who study dance, who do that house dancing, and they'll do it anywhere, and all they need is a circle and a boombox, and that's fine. But that's different, right? I think the culture and the music are a different discussion. I do think it takes all three. I think house music and house people who are not dancing are bored. I think that house culture without house music is boring. So you got to have all three, right? I do not, however, think that what sells itself as house culture now is actually recognizable to people who grew up in house culture for what it was. And everything evolves, and I'm all for evolution, and time changes. So give it a new name. Don't call it house culture, because that's not what it is. Call it what it is. And I'm not sure what a good name would be. If I thought about one, I'm sure I could brand it. But I think it does a disservice to house in the same way that I think it does a disservice to gay. To call what is now gay culture gay, or to call what is now house culture house. I think they have evolved from them, but I don't think that's what they are. I think that a lot of what is marketed now as house music, some of it should probably be EDM, which I thought was just electronic house, but apparently is a different thing. Some of it should be samba, and some of it should be soul. And what remains, some of that is house. I think house culture has become well, you're not gonna like this. I think that house culture has, on the one hand, given people an excuse for slovenliness. I think at a certain point it becomes okay if your house not to take care that your clothes fit or are especially clean or fit or it's okay to not shower first because your house, and that's not okay. This is not. That's bad dance floor etiquette. And true house culture is based on dance floor etiquette. There are certain things we just would not do. Um, I think the zombification of house made it easy for people who couldn't actually keep up with house to have something that they could keep up with, right? So it becomes okay to not really dance. You know that cholo thing, elbows up, side to side, elbows up, side to side. It becomes okay to do that and say you're dancing in the house. Well, no, you're not. You're just doing elbows up, side to side. But if the music were any faster or had any more oomph, you wouldn't be able to do that. You'd have to go sit down because there'd be too much happening on the dance floor around you, right? You take the oomph out of it and all the energy comes down. So you can be with your drink and your pocketbook and your girlfriends, and you can like this and you cannot sweat and still call it house. I know that at a certain point, my generation, which was the last generation of people who the last generation of garage kids, right? It is said that garage children do not age. It is also said that garage children don't change. Well, a lot of garage kids got fat. A lot of the old shelter kids, they gave into the pizza but they didn't stop house, right? They didn't stop dancing. So the zombification also makes it easier to be less agile, to be less healthy, to take less good care of yourself. It is also, and all these things happen at the same time. All these things happen at the same time. A lot of folks had to give up, but didn't want to give up the culture. The softer, sweeter, gentler, aye, doesn't trigger their shit the same way ow does. So it becomes easier to stay sober in this new house environment. And I'm not downing that. That's fine. But it is true that all contributes to a de-edging of house culture. It makes things more inclusive, it makes things more mainstream, but it also makes them far less edgy. It makes them far less interesting and less quick, less engaged, right? Let me also add that I know a lot of people who started their house journeys physically large, who remain so, and who could dance me out of the water. I do not mean to say that that you have to be small to be house. That is not what I mean at all. But it helps to be healthy if you want to dance. And the harder you dance, the more important it is to be healthy. Well, the less hard you have to dance, the less important it is that you be healthy. You don't stand up as long because the music doesn't make you want to be up as long. And it's easy to listen to and like and not move to. Whereas before you couldn't really listen to it and like it and not move to it because it had that. Well, this isn't so much a feature of this other stuff called house. It's a lot more accessible. It's a lot less committal. In the process, it demands less of you socially. It demands less of you physically. It demands nothing of you spiritually. Get something out of it, it's because you put something into it, but it itself demands nothing of you. Marshall Jefferson demanded that you think.
Mhm.
Open your eyes. Give us the light. That's
Mhm.
what we were dancing to. Your work this pussy. Yeah, that's great. Open your eyes. Give us the light. But not open your eyes, give us the light. Oh, and don't sweat. Just be cool. No, open your eyes, sweat, open yourself, get open. Here's the light. You gotta get open. And music that doesn't really pop you out of your shell.
We got to do a part 2 and a part 3. This is fantastic. Thank you so much.
Lovely catching up. Can I plug my shirt, please?
Please do.
Speaking of Larry, Patrick Sleem made this shirt from a drawing that Keith did in '86. I don't know if it was for the Party of Life invite, maybe. But Patrick Sleem made these shirts and I got one, and every so often I wear it. And I love it when people walk up to me that I don't know and are like, "Is that Larry?" And I'm like, "Hey!"
That's awesome.
Yeah. Sure, we can do a part 2.
Yeah, I'll ping you.
I'm really, really honored that you asked, and this was fun.
No, it was incredibly fun. I loved it. Thank you so much. And I'll
welcome,
ping
Chief.
you. We'll schedule it.
Okay, no
Good day.
problem. You too. Peace.
Peace.